Hey everyone, welcome back. As we left last time, I was working a little bit on the front section here. One thing that I definitely noticed was that I was going to have a little bit of a problem with getting the defrost hose into the section there that's on the left-hand side. So one of the, and this is, you can kind of see the vertical hose that's coming up there that it would connect to. And so I'm gonna have to figure out a little bit of a way to make that work because the way I have the ducting run, it's causing some interference in that part. And this is where I was seeing if I could maybe move that down or over or something along those lines. The way this one's working is the heat duct comes up and then tees off to either side into the 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 vent towards the front. I was looking to see if maybe I could run it from on the back side of the heater. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I mean, the direction that I had it running is going to be the best for the heating on the side. This was just another attempt to see if I could maybe make it work. So it pushes up quite a bit on the fiberglass there, and it doesn't seat real well. It just kind of forces everything together. So I'll have to figure out a little bit different way to manage that during this process. But you know, again, with everything that everything we do here, it's like you put it together, kind of check and see how it works and whatnot. The instrument cover or the instrument the section here has you basically put together or put in the M4 rib nuts where the instrument panel goes to. The the angle on it is really narrow, so it's difficult to get the rib nuts seated really well. So I have to come up with a little bit better way to do that. In the meantime, I was having some problems with the nose wheel. It wasn't necessarily that it was not moving well. It's just that in one direction I had full deflection, and in another direction I had maybe 1/3 to 1/4 of the rotation, and I couldn't quite figure it out. I wasn't sure if I missed something when I was doing the install on the pedals, or if the connector rods needed to be set differently. When I put it together, I basically just screwed the rods all the way in on both sides and expected that to be somewhat correct. The instructions weren't very clear on exactly how to fine tune this, but I wanted to get it off the floor so that I could easily move the nose wheel and do the adjustments that I needed to without the whole weight of the engine weighing down on it. It's just you use the main wheels as a fulcrum and you lift the tail up and you slide a sawhorse underneath. It gets you pretty much most of the way there. So anyway, back to the instrument panel here. The one thing you have to do is the instrument panel comes with an extra flange around it that it needs to be trimmed to fit the actual instrument panel. Midwest does provide a kit or a template that you can use to trim that out. I figured I'd give a stab at this. By what I was doing is I just used some paper and some cardboard to trace out and trim into place a template that would allow me to then take that template and then put that over the instrument panel as it exists to make sure that it had enough room for all of the switches and covers and things like that. And then so this is me just tracing the outline. This is the actual opening and as it stands right now. And then I went and I used a scribe to give myself a couple inches on each side of that, because I wasn't going to need to trim more than that, but I just needed something of a frame. That scribe helped me create the outside diameter, and then I just use a knife and a pair of scissors to trim off the inside of the diameter. The inside is ultimately what's going to be the part that needs to be trimmed off from the instrument panel. But I can cut the cardboard quickly and make it fit to the back of the instrument panel as it exists from Midwest, to take into account all of the switches and extra things that protrude through. And then once I get that all set up with the cardboard, I can lay the cardboard back over the instrument panel and use that as a template to draw out where I need to trim. This is just I'm dry fitting it in there each time, making sure that it fits correctly. and then I take the template and I put it over the instrument panel from the backside to see what I need to trim out. So it worked pretty well. I was able to get probably about 80% of the initial trimming done. There was one section, especially where all the main switches are. On this view, it's in the lower or the upper left-hand corner. I trimmed out a little bit too much, simply because the flex in the cardboard made it seem like I needed to trim it a little bit more. But for the most part, I mean, this seemed to work pretty well. So if you're looking for a way to do this, this was my solution on how to take care of it. Once I got it taped into place, then I just used a Sharpie to go around and mark where I needed to trim things off. I got out the good old Dremel and chopped all that out. So, and then I also started working on the sticks themselves. For those of you who, well, I'll discuss the actual handles itself, but this is where I was trimming the fiberglass out. I'm just amazed at how much of an airplane you build with a Dremel these days. I don't know what people did in the past before Dremel existed. And if you're looking at building an airplane, buy a really good Dremel because you're going to use it like crazy. You can see there's a little notch in the upper right-hand corner there. That was for I forget what it was. It was like a circuit breaker or a switch or something like that. So this was me back trying to use the rivets. I just really wasn't happy with them, and as per everything that I've done with the rivets, is I've used some epoxy to kind of secure those in there, and they just didn't secure well. You know, you've got a leather wrap around the fiberglass, and then the fiberglass is back behind. The epoxy really binds to the leather itself, and then when you start putting the screws in, because the rib nut doesn't necessarily grab well because of the angle that it's at, it wants to spin in there. So what I wound up doing was just taking all the rib nuts out. When you're building the plane, I would definitely recommend getting some extra sheets of aluminum. So this is just a little thicker piece of flat aluminum. I divided it by, I don't know, 15 or 16 small half-inch blocks, and because I'm going to need those, I drilled holes into each one of those that were the size of an M4 nut, and then I used a tap to tap out each of the holes so that it would accept the thread for an M4 nut. And then when I'm done with this section here, I went through and I took a jigsaw, I trimmed each of those sections out and then cut one line, so I had 16 basically hard points that I could mount the panel in from behind. And at that point in time, I can use the epoxy to bind so I put it together like this without the epoxy, and then the aluminum nut that I made for the backing. And once I got that done, then I went back through with the epoxy and I smeared epoxy around the outside of the aluminum that I made. So, and that bound securely to the fiberglass. So there's, I don't know, 15 or 16 different screws that go in the instrument panel, and this is just me with the epoxy fitting that back in there. And it's really secure. There's no gaps in the front of the panel itself, because there's not that little like 1/16 of an inch or so of the rib nut that is in there. Back to the sticks. This is just, I was getting the pieces put together there. I also needed to make sure that I trimmed them down. I think it was 14.5 inches. Oh, this is the yoke or the stick controller that I'm using. It's got a trim up, trim down, an autopilot disconnect. I forget what the other one is, and then the push to talk is on the front. It's a softer grip, which I like. I'm not terribly a big fan of the pistol grips, just because if that's between your legs. If you knock your knees or something like that, I just feel like it's not as comfortable. And plus, it's a softer grip, so it's a nice touch to it. So anyway, I'm just trimming this down, getting the grips slipped on, and slipping the wires down through the center there. Again, ignore the date and time. This is still part of the series that the GoPro basically lost its memory and defaulted back to the factory. I was actually kind of, really stressing about doing the sticks, mainly because I mean, it kind of felt like once you put it together, it wasn't going to come apart. But that soft grip went on really well and securely. I'm not concerned about it moving or anything like that. So, and then the other nice part about the stick is, or this particular controller, is it comes with stickers that allow you to label each of the switches themselves, and so you can easily identify them. I'm just cutting the other stick here. I I wanted to have the instrument panel in before I did this part, just simply because I wanted to make sure that I had adequate clearance, but also enough height on the stick. I'm trusting that everything fits correctly at this point in time. So hopefully, when I get it all together, it's exactly the way it needs to be. I'd rather it be a little long than short, because it's easier to cut it shorter than make it longer. So we'll see. I'm just cleaning some of the burrs off of the end there, and getting that ready. And then I committed the cardinal sin of cutting the wires. I did measure them. I thought I had enough wires on them, or enough length on them, but the wires ultimately wound up being a little shorter than they should have been. So again, I had to get the wire stretcher back out, and you'll see a little bit more of that in the next video. Anyway, thanks for watching, and there'll be another video probably next week. And if you catch this before Oshkosh, I'll definitely be at the Sling Ding, and hopefully we'll see everybody there. Thanks.